Hey guys, welcome to Acting Autistic. I'm Matt, and today I want to talk about the autism spectrum. So, for a lot of people, when they envision the autism spectrum, they kind of imagine like a bar, I guess. And on one end, you have not very autistic, and on the other end, you have very autistic, and then you just kind of have everything in between. Um, doesn't really work that way. Like I know you hear a lot about high functioning autism and low functioning autism, but I don't even think that is really correct or adequate in any kind of way to explain the autistic experience. Um, like for myself, I am diagnosed a high functioning autistic. Um, and the reason that I'm diagnosed that way is because of things like I'm holding down a full time job. I'm married, I have a child, and I generally, can get by day to day without much assistance. A big part of that has been just a mixture of masking and not even knowing that I was autistic. I had times when I found it really difficult to cope. I used to have a lot of issues with managing my emotions. I could get sometimes quite angry or very abrupt, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know how to handle that. And I was noticing that as I got older and older, that a lot of those feelings, a lot of those emotions, just dealing with life was getting harder and harder. And that's what actually really pushed me to go and get a diagnosis, or just to see if there was something going on, because I knew inside myself that something up here wasn't functioning the way that it did for everybody else. That something different was going on, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know how to handle it or how to manage it. Since being diagnosed autistic, I've done a lot of exploration and research into kind of what it means to be autistic and what other autistic people deal with, how they deal with that, and also it helped me be quite empowered to advocate for myself, to say things and kind of go like, you know what, there are things that I have problems with, there are things that are harder for me, or things that can cause stress or anxiety, or just things I don't like dealing with, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. And I'm more I understand why things can be getting stressful now, and understanding that why has made it a lot easier to manage and to work with it. But to call it high functioning, I mean, if people knew what was going on in here every single day, I don't think anyone would really classify it as high functioning. I get daily headaches. That's just a simple, straight up, simple example. Most of the time they can be quite low level, but I can get them to a point where every single noise, every single light can be just a lot brighter, feel a lot more intense, feel louder. I have days where I literally wake up and it feels like there's just a physical wall in front of me and I can't push past it. And the thought of going outside just makes me feel like I want to be sick. I can get massive pits and knots and stuff in my stomach around social situations. And trying to keep track and follow social situations can be really stressful. But a lot of the time I just kind of deal with that. I mask it. But then when I get home, some days I literally just kind of go to my bedroom and I get into bed and I turn the lights off and I put on a show that I've probably watched 100 times before. Something, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or Teen Titans Go or Supernatural, like something that I'm familiar with. I know what to expect. And yeah, I just kind of sit there kind of in a bit of a ball under my blanket, lights off, watching this show to kind of help regulate things, because dealing with anything else when I get home is just too much. And that's considered high functioning. So when we talk about the autism spectrum, it's realistically more kind of like a color wheel, I guess, or a circle. And throughout this circle are all different points and different things that can be a challenge or more difficult for someone who is autistic. And some people have more spots on this circle and more things that they're dealing with. Some people may have less. on one particular day, you might have a lot of dots over on this part of the circle, but not much over here. And then the next day, that shifts around, and suddenly there's a lot of things over here that are more difficult and harder to manage, and the other side is clear. And it's kind of forever shifting and moving depending on kind of what else you're dealing with and what you're managing and how things are going in life at that particular time, in that particular day or that particular hour, or even if you know something like is coming up in a couple of weeks, that could affect things that are going on now, because you know that this other thing is coming up and you know that you need to be prepared for that. So how you manage your time leading up to this other thing can really impact how everything else flows. So when you talk about the spectrum, it's not this line. It's not a point A to point B. It's not this high functioning, low functioning. It's just it's a circle with a forever flowing, ebbing, moving thing that can affect someone from one day to the next. Now, yes, look, definitely some people are affected more or have more challenges when it comes to autism. And look, I guess if you want to be talking about comparisons, then someone like myself could be considered definitely a higher functioning than some other people. But it doesn't mean that things are necessarily easier for myself. Doesn't necessarily mean they're harder either. It just means that my set of challenges and what I'm dealing with is, just it's on a different level to somebody else. And this doesn't just, it doesn't happen just with autism. It happens with everyday life. We all go through different things. We all have things happen in our life that some days makes life more challenging compared to somebody else, and then other days things can be easier compared to somebody else. It's the same kind of deal. It's some kind of management of just life. In regards to the spectrum, the other thing I also want to talk about is, and I hear this so often, people saying, but we're all a little bit autistic. Yeah, and you know what? Like, let me put on a pair of rollerblades and I'm a semi-trailer. Like, I've got 8 wheels. What's the difference? We're not all a little bit autistic. You're autistic or you're not. It's simple as that. It is black and white in that regard. You're autistic or you're not autistic. That's not to say that you may not have traits that are shared with somebody who is autistic. But you can't just go, oh, tick, I've got one thing that someone who is autistic has, so I myself must be autistic. No, we all have different things that can affect us. Our brains are a incredibly complicated, messy, wondrous, fantastic thing, and brains work in different ways based on environmental factors, based on genetic factors, based on so many different things that can affect the way our brains like to work. And so, there's introverts and extroverts, people who are really outgoing, like to talk to people, and people who prefer like smaller groups, or they don't like to be socializing at all. Now, a common trait for autistic people is not liking socializing. A lot of autistic people generally are introverts, but that doesn't mean that every single introvert is a little bit autistic. It also is like you have people who have, and this is quite common for autistic people, is like intense interests, things that we just really get involved with, and we learn it inside and out, and it's something that we just take a great interest or pleasure or comfort in. Now, that's not to say that other people who aren't autistic can't also find interests that they're really passionate about. It happens all the time. And then you have people as well, so I don't like eye contact. I try to avoid eye contact. Now, I've gotten to a point where I can kind of fake it. I can kind of look at different points on someone's face and make it look like I'm looking at them while I'm not directly making eye contact. Other people sometimes feel a bit shy, or they feel a bit odd with eye contact, so they don't make eye contact as well. Now, all those individual things people can have, but I have all three. And there are other things that then build up, so you get this kind of case built up, I guess. And that's how you get diagnosed as autistic, because it's not just one or two things that you might do that are similar to someone who's autistic that then makes you autistic. It's a whole bunch of different things that kind of build up and come together and end up with you having a diagnosis of autism. So anyone out there who still says things like, oh, well, we're a little bit autistic, we're all a little bit autistic. No, you're not. We're not. You're autistic or you're not autistic. It's like we're not all a little bit OCD just because we like to have things neat and tidy. I like to have things neat and tidy. I like things to have their place. And I can be to the point where like I know where I put something. And if it's not there, or if it's been moved slightly, I know it's been moved because I know where I put it. I remember where I put it. That's not OCD. That's just I have a good memory. I remember where I put things. And I know where it should be if I go to look for it again. Again, it doesn't make me OCD. It's just certain things that I like that make me a bit more comfortable with putting things in a certain place. So, in that regards, people aren't a little bit something. They are something or they're not something. Now, look, if you think you might be a little bit autistic, then look, definitely go ahead, look into autism, talk to other autistic people, seek out a diagnosis. There may be some things that you kind of go like, oh yeah, I do that. I relate to this in regards to autism. I relate to that. Oh yeah, I do this thing too. And that thought of being a little bit autistic may get the ball rolling on kind of going, maybe I am autistic. But if you just kind of do one thing that someone else does, and you think that gives you the right or permission to then go, well, I'm a little bit like this, you're not. And you need to stop that very quickly. So, on that note, autism spectrum, think of it more like a circle, think about it kind of evolving and moving, and when you try and think about someone being high functioning or low functioning, just try and think about what that person is going through every single day to exist in the same space as you. Think about little things that you might do that could actually be triggering to that person, that might actually make their existence in their day that little bit harder. And I'm not saying that the world needs to completely change to accommodate people who can struggle existing in what we call this normal world. But if there is something you can do to show a bit more kindness, something you can do that can be of assistance, or even if you ever notice that maybe someone is struggling, maybe someone seems like they are having a really hard day, or that something seems to be kind of getting to them, just a simple, hey, how you going? Is there anything I can do to help you? Because one of the hardest parts with the autism spectrum disorder and existing in a world that's really not designed or built for someone like myself is just not having other people understand. And if someone can just be a bit more understanding and be willing to make a little change that to me can be a humongous thing, that'll just make life a whole lot easier.